doing an excellent job. Didn't I just say that? I'd like to thank you all for coming. I've got a couple announcements to make before we get started. Also, if you don't have a seat and there's some empty seats around, please make friends. The whole point of our industry is to make connections and get things going. So become friendly with one another. That's how we work. All right, so that's a good one. I don't see people moving very far.
Did it.
Thanks, Carly. Appreciate that.
There's lots of room up here.
Yeah, if you guys want to stand behind us, that would be super awkward, but like, you could. We're not. Yeah, I'm against that. Don't do that.
Cheaper
That's all. All right, so I just wanted to start this evening with a land acknowledgement. So Alberta Music acknowledges that we are gathered here today on Treaty 6 land, a traditional gathering place for diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others whose histories, languages, arts, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. Now, as we move on through our programming, as you can tell, we are near the washrooms. So throughout the program tonight, there will be the hand blowers going off throughout the whole thing. So if you guys miss anything, please wave your arms, let us know that you'd like that information repeated. Just like as we go through the night, we're going to be talking, we're going to try to keep it really informal. So if you have a question about the topic that we're discussing at the moment, please raise your hand and we'll get to that topic at the same time. So feel comfortable doing that. We want the information out there that you guys are most interested in hearing about. Everyone here is trying to get your careers to gain more momentum. That's why we're all here tonight, so feel comfortable asking questions. All right, so I want to introduce, I'm just going to do super quick intros, and then they're going to briefly tell you about the work that they do and what we're going to talk about briefly. So we've got Catherine, she's here with the CBC. We've got Grant, he's with CKUA, and we've got Bill, he's a radio tracker. I'd like all of you guys to take turns introducing yourselves. Please also, everyone, welcome them here. Thank them for coming tonight.
I guess I'll start because I'm closest to you. Okay, so I'm Catherine Duncan, and I am a CBC radio host and producer, based in Calgary, often work in Toronto as well. The show that you are probably most interested in is The Key of A, because it's about Alberta musicians and people doing original music based all over Alberta. Obviously, the lion's share is the cities, Calgary, Edmonton, some Lethbridge, some Red Deer. Try to go beyond that. Oh,
what was the name of that show?
It's called Key of A, and A as in Alberta as opposed to EH, which some people think is like, oh, Canadian. So I was surprised when somebody first said that to me, so now I do say A as in Alberta, so thank you for asking that. Yeah, so really it's a show that aims to discover and help to promote and reflect music making by people like you, I'm sure, of all kinds except classical. My other whole ballywick is classical music, and that was my reverb. That was my actual university training. I trained as a classical musician, and radio has been the way that I've been able to make a living as a musician, not playing flute in an orchestra, but doing something that I love and that I really care about and that I feel is important. And so I do classical programming on CBC Music, which is the new name for Radio 2. If any of you guys are Radio 2, former Radio 2 listeners, now it's called CBC Music, and I think that's a way better way to talk about what that station does for Canadian musicians. So I think that's all I should say because I'm taking a lot of room. So next up, Raj from CKUA.
And I'd like to start by saying, how about it for Catherine Duncan, everybody? I'm such a huge fan of hers. And this event is already great for me because I got to meet her. And so do you, which is amazing. I used to do a couple of Alberta-centric shows myself. And it's a real pleasure and privilege, and it's also really hard to do, and Catherine does such an amazing show across so many different genres, and it's really cool that she's here talking to us tonight. I think that's amazing. So that's just the first reason I'm thrilled to be here. Also, I'm really delighted to represent community and campus radio. Actually, I'm sitting in for Amy Van Keeken, who, like me, volunteers at CJSR, which is the campus station here in Edmonton at the U of A. And she also is an employee, like me, at CKUA, which is Alberta's public broadcaster. And it's a real treat for me to be here and make an attempt to seem like somebody that belongs at this table, because my approach has been, maybe like some of yours, has been extremely DIY. So I'm going to learn about as much as you guys do tonight, I think, too. But at the same time, I do host the morning program on CKUA, which is like 3 hours, 5 days a week, and that's a lot of music, and I choose all the music myself. So in that sense, I do have a lot of choices to make each and every day, and maybe on this occasion, while I'm trying to help you in your endeavors, you can maybe help me and show me how to get to your great music, and make some of those choices a little bit easier for tomorrow's show, for instance. And so I'm really excited to be here representing CKUA in that capacity. And also I've been volunteering at CJSR for, I think, like 25 years or something crazy like that. And I continue to do the Wednesday evening blues program. In fact, I had to pre-record it to be here with you tonight. So I'll be able to, in some ways, speak to how campus radio maybe fields and processes music in its own lovably slapdash way, and how CKUA also might be a resource for you and what you do. And like you, I'll be all ears, and I'm really excited to see you guys here tonight. Thanks for being here.
Edmonton, it's great to be here. My name is Bill Miller. Like everyone here, music's been my life. I studied music at Humber College, guitar. With a friend and business partner, we bought the quintessential Dodge Ram black van with tinted windows, and we drove to Vancouver. And we'd never been out there, and people were wandering in the front of our van. We felt like this like a zombie-esque type thing, and then we realized this is Hastings Street, which didn't mean anything to us at the time, and it was great, and it was exciting, and you guys are doing exciting things. I started a recording studio called The Control Room. And one of the threads is that, when you're in a community, you really never know how things are going to play out, what opportunities will come, things will fly by, and you have a decision. You grab onto that opportunity like a hook, or you let it go by. And it's an interesting thing. And the fabric of that community, not to be cheesy, is really critical. And which leads to radio promo. I own and operate a Vancouver-based radio promotion company called Sharp Nine Music. I've been doing this for about 11 years, and I'll be honest, I would have never, in my greatest dreams, would have imagined that radio or radio promotion would be my gig. It was, just totally off the sphere of reality, and it was through mutual friendships and relationships and introductions, and it was one of those hooks that came by. Dude, we think you'd be good at this. Do you want to check it out? And at the time, I just wanted to play guitar. I had a bit of a break, and I ended up thinking, screw it. Let's check this out, and here we are today. So I do radio promo. I don't like the term radio tracking. It sounds too close to radio stalking, but unfortunately accurate to some extent. I've had the pleasure of working with some outstanding artists, either doing their direct radio campaigns or indirectly working with them. Artists that you may or may not be familiar with: Carly Rae Jepsen, Favorite Drive, Dan Davidson from Edmonton's own, and FKB band, friends and clients that are here. Great to see you guys. And hopefully we'll have a dialogue and be able to present some stuff and answer some questions and see if we can help you out.
So let's start at the top. So how does a radio station determine what songs get played? Who is that person? What do they do, and how do we get access to them? Who wants to take that on?
What are we talking? We should break that down. So I sort of specialize in commercial radio, right? And we've got the complete swath. So where do we want to start with that? Like CDC or college campus? Different answers to that question.
Why don't you go, Grant?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. I'm a good place to start actually, because my answer is like, you bring your CD to the radio station, and you say, "Can you play my CD?" And that's pretty much it. Although there have been refinements to that recently. Like for instance, CJSR and CKUA both used to have rules where they didn't accept singles and they didn't accept digital music, and God forbid, digital singles. So that's all changed, of course, as people put music out in different formats. Radio grudgingly will accede to that. So basically, at CJSR, there is a music director, and his job is to look at what's arrived and decide what fits with CJSR's listenership, roughly speaking, broadly speaking, eclectic though it might be. And so he makes some choices, some editorial decisions of his own, and then from that point he takes the discs or digital submissions that he's received and puts them out in a kind of publication via email to the various programmers at the station, and there are literally 100 of them at any given time. So it's a pretty broad, when I'm talking about anything as far as CJSR goes, I'm painting with a pretty broad paintbrush, but he puts out a collection of albums in update format. There's like a bulletin via email. It says this is what's new, this is what's digital, this is what's physical, and it's all collected in like an actual shelf in the station physically, and then there's a binder, an actual binder with a printout, an actual printout of the digital submissions. And one thing, the only thing really that could, maybe result in more programmers checking out your music and potentially playing it on the radio is that he'll say, this is what caught my ear so far from what I listened to. And a lot of that's just down to his own personal taste, so there's nothing I can really offer in terms of the empirical data that you can give to him to make it more likely that the programmers will get to hear your stuff. But if it is something that has, like on paper, something that's really important, like if there's something that you can say in a few words about what your music does, and maybe why it stands out from everything else, not just because it's like heartfelt or because it's from a broad range of influences, but something that is directly going to speak to, what might just set it apart from the other things. Not better, not necessarily hipper or anything, just, is there some piece of information that you can pass along? Like, this band has been together since they were 3 years old. This band met while on an exchange in Taiwan. This band was produced by X producer, or this band is dedicated to doing, 1920s versions of SNFU songs or something. Like, it doesn't have to be gimmicky, but if you can boil it down to one or two sentences and really make an impact with those, and again, make it as ungeneric as possible in your description, and don't be afraid to use really specific things. Like if you want to use a signpost, like there's a band or a combination of bands that you're really, really influenced by or inspired by, don't be afraid to say that, because that might be enough to make the music director take a second listen, and then he might pass it along and use your words. He might parrot what you say to the programmers, and then they might be intrigued as well. So you never really know, but just try to make it as concise as you can. If you're going to submit your stuff and you're going to have some sort of biographical information that you're presenting along with it, really try to make it impact in as concise a space as you can. For sure. So that's CJSR. At CKUA, there isn't a music director at the moment, which is kind of amazing, but we do have this phenomenal library technician who is in charge of like this unbelievable repository of music that they have at CKUA on 78s and LPs and 45s and CDs, and yes, now digital and singles even. And so she's kind of in charge of saying, what are we going to accept? Because we get a lot of different music from all around the world, and not all of it is suitable for the station for various reasons. Some of it's like, it's one of the few radio stations where if it's a little too commercial sounding, they probably won't keep it, which is kind of bizarre, but that's the way it is there. They really, part of their mandate is not to play hits, so if it sounds too much like a hit, they don't, they might not keep it. So there's that. But also, it's just kind of a quality control thing too, because as opposed to CJSR, which is really open to like as DIY as you want, at CKUA, if it's really rough sounding, they might just say this isn't really up our alley. Or if it's too heavy or too techno or something, it's going to be like maybe a barrier. They'll decide for the listeners. So basically, there's a kind of gatekeeper that just sort of says, you have to be this tall to ride the ride, like well produced and not in some way abrasive to the ear of what they imagine to be the average CKUA listener, whoever that is. And then once that's in there, it's all up to the DJs. And it's the same with CJSR. So basically there is no one single key master, which is really unusual. It's very odd in the world of radio, but that's why if you are really interested and trying to receive some on-air love from CJSR or CKUA, it's really important to try to do your homework and see where would your music fit on that particular radio station, and what's the show that you think, or the several shows where you think it might really find a home, and maybe you can find a way to get in touch with the people that host those shows, because the hosts are also the programmers, which is also unusual. So it's pretty easy to find a way to get in touch with those folks, and they do receive a lot of correspondence, but they're always really glad to talk to musicians that have new music to offer. In particular, as I say, if you don't overwhelm them with too much detail and overly poetic odyssey of a band bio, like, if you can give them something that's just a few kernels of information to let them know what you're doing, that's all that you really need to do to get in the door, basically, and then from there they'll kind of make the decisions. But it's really important to find a way to connect with the programmers themselves. Yes, sir.
Will you be contacted if you get played? Like if you're going to get played?
Oh,
if someone
such a good
likes
question.
your stuff, will you be
Right.
contacted?
Will you be contacted? No. Sorry.
Sometimes.
Yeah, right. Sometimes, if you email and say, "Hey, did you play me, or are you going to play me?" They might respond, "Yes, I did," or "No, I won't," or "This is why I'm not going to," or "I will, and if I can remember, I'll let you know ahead of time." But unfortunately, because it's so, a lot of the people that work at the community campus stations are horribly overtasked already. So. Unlike everywhere else in radio, I'm sure, of course. But if you try to foster like a really direct relationship with them, there is definitely a chance. They certainly will not contact you out of the blue, however, which is a little different.
So following up is important.
Absolutely, yes, you're right. Following up is absolutely crucial. That's so true, and don't be afraid to do so. And of course, also bear in mind it might be a heartbreaking experience, because not every album or project fits every show or station. So it may not work out, but yeah, it's really important to follow up. You're absolutely right about that. That's an excellent point. Hello, I'm taking up all the airtime.
I was just wondering then, when you're talking about bio, like having too much information, does a one sheet, does that have too much information, or is that the right amount of information, or?
Well, I know that Catherine has some really nuanced thoughts about that, because we were talking about it before the seminar started, and I kind of feel like I have some thoughts of my own, but I'm pretty sure that I will learn more listening to Catherine talk about that than I would be able to pass along from my own hard-won wisdom. So Catherine, why don't you take over?
Sure, because I totally agree with basically everything you said already, so I don't have to go over that ground. Although what I would add to that is what you were talking about, like this specific thing, and you were in grade 3 together in Taiwan or something. So at CBC, I think it's about story. If you think about what's your story, because there's so much amazing music out there, and we can't put it all on the radio, and we can't even read all the emails that come in because there's just too many at CBC anyway. But there is a huge appetite for music too, and there's an even huger appetite for story. So I mean, on the CBC Music Network, which is all about music, That's one side of it, and I can kind of tell you how to pitch to that. But on the Radio 1 side, which is where Q of A is, there are all these other local shows, right? You have Radioactive, you have Daybreak Alberta, you have the noon shows, you have the after, there's lots of other programs. Even, as it happens, like lots of these shows play music. And what they're mostly interested in is a story and a character and people. And you guys are all people and have your own stories. And if you can focus maybe on that in what you send us, and like it's the hook, right? It's the thing that, and that's what they call it in journalism too, is the hook, right? Like when is it happening? Is it something I need to know about right now? Am I gonna miss it? Is it something that just happened? Is it never happened before? Is it the biggest, the best? And obviously nobody, you don't have to like make that stuff up, right? I mean, don't try and do it all. But think in your own mind about like, what are you sending? What is special to you about what you're doing? Why did you choose to do it? Was there a moment that made your music more important to you, or did you get a reaction from somebody? Like, it's just trying to connect with an emotion or an action, a thing, like a piece of news, because CBC Radio 1 especially is all about news, like, and current affairs and things that are going on. And music is definitely a big part of that, and a way to connect with people's emotions and connect with memory, and also reflect. We're big into the public broadcaster. We're mandated and passionate about reflecting Canada and Edmonton and Alberta, and so the music that comes out of this place is a story into itself. And then if you can get it to us in a way that we can go, so if you send an email, the subject line, that's what we were talking about at dinner, the subject line is so important. Like, why should I open this email as opposed to media release, February 21st, 2018? Like, there's your whole subject line. I have no idea what your thing is about. But, something about location or time or news in some way. First this, best that, I don't know, heartbreaking story of a teenage girl who, and obviously these all sound like cliches, but in fact they work, right? If they're true, they're the thing that's going to get us to go, there's a story here. And also what you said about researching the shows. So, on CBC Radio 2, now known as CBC Music, I'm still back in the last week, right? Before we rebranded. We do have a gatekeeper team. Jeanette Cabral is one of them, and they're based in Toronto, and I can give you their email addresses, and they're happy to receive your stuff, and they'll listen to it. And if it fits the program mandate and the style and what people want to hear, and if it is professionally produced, it really has to be, can't be the ramshackle DIY stuff for CBC specifically, then got as good a chance as anybody of getting on. With the shows that I do, like Q of A, for example, that's got a regional, local mandate, and so I'm interested in those things, and I get to pick. I guess that's what I was trying to say. So I'm a gatekeeper in Alberta, and when something really catches my ear and I put it on the radio and I get great feedback, then I send it up the line. And kind of go, you guys should hear this. For example, Ellen Doty, jazz singer in Calgary, I was just talking to the producer of Saturday Night Jazz on CBC Music, and who also programs all the jazz streams. And she said, I listened to that whole album and it's all good and it's all going on the shows. So, and that's just, she didn't have to be from New York or Vancouver or somewhere. She just happened to be from Okotoks, and now lives in Calgary. I'll stop now because we'll have more questions.
But that's a really distinctive sounding album too. That's
a great album.
She didn't just figure out how to sound like somebody from New York, right? She made an album.
She sounds like herself.
Yeah, it's an album with no bass player on it. It's very unusual as a jazz record. It pushes the boundaries in lots of ways. But it found its audience, right? Because it was so good, and it is really a great when you see that happen. And I think it's worth don't underestimate how much the people out there in all the various cogs in the music machinery want you to succeed. They really do. And as Catherine says, just try to, search your feelings and it can be hard when it's your own story that you're reflecting on, but what makes you different? Like, why are you different? Not just, what you are putting into your music, but as Catherine says, if there's something about you as an artist that is unusual, take a moment and reflect on that and see if you can't maybe celebrate it, because that could be something that grabs somebody's attention and then they fall in love with your music.
And you can do exercises. Like, I'm sure everyone here has that one fan, that one friend, their auntie, someone who loves them and will tell anybody and their brother about your band. So how does that person speak about your band? Put yourselves in their shoes and unashamedly talk about yourself like they would. Be your own auntie. And then that's how you get to a place where you can be like, oh, that's a story that I can tell to someone else that they can carry forward. Because it's so awkward to talk about your music all the time.
My band is really good. It's so hard to say that. But you can say a story about yourself or about your band or about an idea that you have.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of bands that I love championing. I love this band called Partner. They're super great. The first time that I saw them, I was fist pumping in the back of the room, and for the first time in 10 years, I stood in line and I bought a t-shirt. And I go to a lot of shows and I don't stand in line to buy t-shirts, but I bought a Partner t-shirt and I wear it. And every time I go to airports, I wear my Partner t-shirt. And I hope someone goes, hey, that band Partner's awesome. And that's a story, right? I don't know them, they're not my friends, but I created a whole story about that band because I loved the show that they put on, I loved the music that they were putting out, and it was different. And you do that when you perform, so don't forget about that. Talk to the people that are at your shows because they'll give you your story.
Yeah, one of the things I ask people when I interview them, because people don't want to brag about their own music and it's really awkward, is when somebody gives you a compliment after a show, when they come up to you after your show and they liked your show, what do they say? That's gold, right? If you can remember that, if somebody said, you reminded me of this amazing holiday I had when it was dark and I just graduated from high school and I was on the beach and there was a fire. If anybody tells you anything remotely like that, then you can tell that to us and we'll play your record, kind of. It's gold because it's real. It was inspired by your music. You're not bragging, you're just repeating what somebody told you that you inspired, so.
I've got a bit of a different vantage point.
Of course you do.
My focus is commercial terrestrial radio, right? The chart reporting panels, when we talk about getting chart traction, having a top 10, top 20, and it's interesting because, my sense is that you're up against absolute indifference, and the term, time is of the essence, which we kind of touched on, which is there's just not a lot of time for people to read a bio, even a one sheet. You're asking about a one sheet. We're talking about people just blowing through stuff. Right? You've got, and I'm talking more so within my lane. If I'm reaching out to Sonic or The Bear or 91.7 Kiss or whatever, right? It's got to be pointed, or no one cares, delete, and over. That's my perception. I do every day. My tip for you all, and I'll be interested to see what you guys think, is I think if you want to be on the radio at every level, you have to be expected to do research, and so often I'll talk to people and they'll chuckle, artists will say, well, I don't listen to the radio, man, I never listen to the radio. Well then, don't expect to be on the radio, don't want to be on the radio, okay? If you're asking, whether it's Rogers or Bell Media or CBC or community radio, to invest in your brand, I suggest that you better invest in their brand. Okay, and do a little research. And my tip is do some research and start off with identifying that you listen to the people that you're reaching out to. It's not just about you. Hey, I'm in a band and I'm great. And here's like another gazillions of, how do you distinguish that? That's pretty tough to do, right? It's pretty tough to distinguish yourselves without being flowery and goofy. So I suggest the first thing you do is identify that you know who you're reaching out to, right? Because that's going to mean something, right? Versus, this doesn't make sense, delete, gone. I listened to your show. I've loved your show, and I've listened for you. And even if that's not the case, I'm aware of your show. I know what you play, and I'm very acutely aware of who you are. That's a really good point. That's going to, in my opinion, going to get somebody's attention, right? Start off with, I care with what you do before I start blathering off about what we do. Set the tone, right? And be respectful. And I think, industry professionals that are absolutely inundated with emails and jokers, man. You guys have to try to distinguish yourself, as do I, professionally, from an ocean of jokers out there that are sending inappropriate music to wrong formats, and it's like, oh my God. And, that's why it's tough. No one's got time for that, right? So time is of the essence. Just what Grant was saying. There's not, you can't go into, here's our plan. No one's going to read that, man. Well, maybe someone will. But a lot of people will look at that and their eyes will cross and delete, right? So for commercial radio purposes, if you can't boil it down into a couple quick points that suggest why anybody should give a damn to even read your message, it's done. Over. And anyways, that's my thing. Do your research and identify the people, whether it's a host, whether it's a music director, know what they do, know the nature of the playlists. Does your music make sense? Because if your music doesn't make sense, you're wasting your time and you're not helping yourself. And I'll just say quickly, because we'll probably get into this more, that a lot of this isn't rocket science. If you go on to any playlist, you can see what's being played, right? And so if it's a heavy metal band, and you're looking, okay, April Wine, Chilliwack, Fleetwood Mac, ZZ Top, I don't know, man. Is this the right target for me to be saying, I think you should stop what you're doing, you're a busy person, and I want to take use of your time to tell you about why I'm happy. So do your homework. It's the number one thing that will serve you well.
When you say, does your music make sense, do you mean for the format of the station or the playlist, or like in some other way?
If we're talking about radio, if we're talking about sonic, right? You wouldn't want to send a heavy metal song or something that might be more appropriate for the Bear to Sonic just because Sonic's in Edmonton. Sorry, man, it's not enough. Like, is it a fit or not? And the very first thing that anyone's going to figure out is you don't know what you're talking about if you're not addressing that. Hey, I get it, man. And the reason I'm reaching out to you is I know what you guys do. I listen, and I think this is a fit. And I'm just going to give you some bullet points, and I'd be really grateful if you've got time to take a quick listen.
That's a demonstration that you respect their time, right? So
And also, I think Bill is so bang on, because there isn't any way that you can put a package together that is so great it's going to convince some radio entity to play something that is wrong for their station. They just won't. So it really does save everybody so much time, including yourself, if you just make sure that you do tactical strategic strikes and make sure you're paying attention, like Bill said, really do your research on who you're trying to lobby.
Let's say you have a band that plays multiple genres, but they have a specific song that works for your station. That station looks at your stuff and they play metal music as well. So you're contacting Sonic and you have a pop song, but then they check out your stuff and you've got metal, Is that something that is going to deter you from them choosing to play your stuff because your other stuff does not quite fit their criteria?
I don't think so. I mean, especially if you have the subject line and the story. So, for example, anybody here in the band Striker?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
I've served the guy.
Really? No, but anybody in the band? No. really, really, really awesome band. I can't really play them on the key of A. I love that music. I think it's fantastic. Between 5 and 6 on Radio 1 in CBC land on Saturday afternoon, the kids are driving home from the hockey game, and the moms are in the kitchen making dinner and having a glass of wine, and it's after Sheila Rogers has been talking to authors, and right before the World is, it's just. So I found one track though, like when they won. Was it the most recent thing? They won tons of stuff, and I've always felt like a jerk for not playing them. And I found a track that I could play. It was like 2 minutes long. It was instrumental, but still, I made the effort because I know they're a really good band, and I can hear that. But I can't play in my format on my show.
I got a request for that yesterday, actually. Yeah.
Do you find another track for me?
No, I just wanted to add on to that. It's the old adage of professionals or amateurs borrow, professionals steal. Find your favorite bands, see what radio stations they're played on, call those radio stations.
Yeah,
It's very simple.
and it's really eclectic. Like, I think it depends on the format or the station. That is, like, some stations are really geared towards like full albums. Like, they don't play full albums, but they won't just key on one song. Other radio stations, most radio stations, are really interested in a single song. So Bill, maybe you could speak to that. Like, maybe if an artist has like one big radio-friendly giant pop tune and everything else is much less so, it kind of doesn't really matter, right? Because you're really interested in the one song.
I'm going to disagree.
Okay, sorry.
I would say more and more
It was a
that I
naive
would agree.
question.
So
But
there we go, we disagree with each
But
other.
here's the beauty of it. The programming mandates are completely different. So that's the distinction we need to make. It's not a right or wrong thing. It's you guys figuring out through the distinctions of what Grant and Catherine are saying to find out if there's a home there, right? And my world is a little pinprick, man, and I would say it is a problem. I could be wrong. I'm not trying to be. I would say it is an issue because if Sonic or the Bear goes and they hear something poppy, it's like, psst, this is, what are we investing in? Because when we're talking about ads, right, in markets where there's millions of dollars at stake for the ratings and stations that are on PPM or doing ratings diaries, and their books will decide whether they keep their jobs, there's not a lot of room for experimentation in those things. And I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting for a second that it's more important or better at all. It's just the distinction of difference. So my thing for what I do, I think it would be a problem.
So you're talking about like brand identity, right? Like,
Well, if
an artist is a brand.
If you send a heavy song to the Bear that's kick-ass and a perfect fit for the Bear, and it works, the guy goes, all right, I'm going to go and take a peek here. Toby's going to go and take a listen on your website, if that were to happen. And he sees, listens to something that's incongruent with, then what am I don't have time for this. What is the brand here? Is this a pop band? Is it a heavy band? Or is this like a cover band? It's too complex. I don't think, you're asking, with so much on the line for people to invest in your brand. And if your brand isn't hyper-focused, then what are we selling? That's different. See,
It's a total opposite to what
well,
I'm
because
doing.
but the thing about what Catherine said, and God bless this situation, is she was invested enough as an artist herself and as a supporter to say that she took the time. That's the difference, man. A lot of, and I'm not trying to put down commercial radio people. It's just like, it's just a different thing. We don't care. Indifference, ignorance. I'm busy. I've got Sony's new app. Why should I don't have time for this? So if there's anything that veers off, any kind of narrative about a strong, very clear vision of what you do, that's a problem in my opinion. And if you have invested, passionate music people that have platforms like these two, that's beautiful and it's different. But the key point is Catherine was looking to try and help. I hate to say it, but most people that I'm dealing with just don't have the time to care that much. I hate to say it. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, that's very interesting because it is totally opposite of what I thought. Because with from our perspective, I know at CKUA there's certain, like on my show in the morning there are some artists where they literally like have 10 great albums, and there's literally one song that works great on the show that I do, and I just, for my own greedy purposes, I wish they would come out with more songs like that one song, but I'll play that one song. It doesn't matter that the other 99 songs in our library by them don't fit with the show. So in that sense, maybe CBC, maybe community radio is more suited to a really eclectic presentation like that. If you are like a very diverse artist in that respect.
Well, it's a bit, I'm not putting down commercial radio, it's my business, but it's about music. And you're saying, I love this, and wow, this fits, and I want to get behind this, and I want to help. Whereas, when we're talking about, again, we're talking about Bell Media and Rogers and Newscap, and these are media conglomerates where it's just too much at stake. So there's no, wow, I'm going to find this one song, and is there going to be another single? Does it fit? Or why would we create playlist time at the expense of other things if I can't see an absolute linear thread of where we're going with that? Otherwise, we're not going to give you that break because we can't see the trajectory.
So an established brand that also follows that specific song that you are pushing, like having a story, having a brand, having something that they can grab onto and rely on is important.
I think it's important with anything that's, if you're selling sneakers, it's important, right? Are they basketball sneakers? Are they casual? What are, who's the audience?
Yeah.
Right? These radio stations are based on testing, data, and research. And there's not a lot of fooling around now. There's no experimentation. This is about, are we serving our audience, our listeners? And if we're not, there's repercussions to that in the world of the Sonics and the Bears and the Virgin Edmontons and Fresh FMs of the world.
Bill mentioned PPMs, and that's like the ratings in radio, and it is, it's almost like in some commercial entities, there's just so much on the line, as you mentioned, there's so many dollars at stake that basically everyone's got to be a winner, and there's no margin for error, and it's just a different agreement that the listener makes with the radio station when it comes to the CBC, for instance, which has got a mandate to reflect the community and to entertain, of course, but also to edify. And with campus and community radio, it's the listener literally is partly bankrolling the station. They're community supported, are publicly funded in that sense, or donor supported, and the CBC also obviously government supported. So there's a little bit more like, well, I hate this, so I'm just going to switch the radio to a different station for 5 minutes and come back. Whereas commercial radio doesn't have that latitude. So it's kind of different. At the same time, commercial radio has a lot more listeners, I think, than obviously than CJSR or CKUA does. So it's just a matter of catering to where you think your audience is. What does your music, what platform would best suit your music, and try to just go right for the jugular, just go for that.
Let's step back a little bit, and why don't you guys tell everyone about what your perfect pitch email is? What information are you looking for? Like, how do you actually craft that as a musician trying to get onto these different shows? We touched on it a little bit, but let's really flesh that out.
Well, so it's kind of what we've been saying. So knowing who you're writing to, why what you're trying to pitch is a good fit for the person and the show and the station and the network that you're pitching to. And to put that in the subject line, like really, we do get a lot of emails, and a lot of them are like pitches for metal bands in New York City and come to the opening. And like, really, literally, I get a ton of those. I could go to like openings in New York City every night of the week if they would send me a plane ticket. So like, know that it's a metal station, or that it's a top 40 station, or that it's an eclectic, non-commercial, relentlessly non-commercial statement, and like know who your audience is, and how we might help you to reach your audience, and how we could be part of your audience, and really make your subject line as grabby as possible. If it's like, I get a lot of "Hi Catherines," and that's just a generic "Hi Catherine, come to my show in New York City tomorrow night." So that's not quite enough, right? But find a way to reference the thing that that we're in charge of.
what, like local band, putting out debut CD on, you know.
Thursday night, I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
Like the first, I don't know. I mean, I'm bad with the first and the biggest, but like those kinds of, what are those parts of speech called? Superlatives. Those are it. Yeah, superlatives are
Those
good
guys broke
if
up.
they're true.
Sorry,
Yeah.
that's an old joke.
Good joke.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, for me, I think, you know, I probably have a lot less paperwork to do than, you know, a lot of folks in the radio world, for sure. But I still feel like I get a zillion emails from people, and they're all really lovely, but a lot of them are like, you know, about some kind of immensely inappropriate, both musically and geographically, phenomenon that really does not have any bearing on what I do. So, like Catherine says, if you can boil it down to something that really does get to the kernel of what's actually going on, and hopefully is some kind of also some sort of hook that maybe it doesn't necessarily need to be like a gimmicky, it could be just like a signpost towards something. Like if you could be as concrete as possible, you know, like if you're influenced by a certain artist, you can say that, that's okay. And if it's a notable thing that you're doing for whatever reason, it's okay to just lead with that as well. And you don't have to like beat around the bush too much. You can just imagine that the person that's going to be reading this message is also going to read 199 other ones in the same morning, and then just sort of try to tailor it to that. And I think it would probably, you know, effectively be really a pretty brief and concise and hopefully interesting thing. And again, like, don't be afraid to confront your own identity. And so many of us spend a lot of time running away from our actual identity, and that's part of what music is, I think, really. But don't be afraid to say, this is where I come from, this is what I've done, this is who I am, because maybe you think it's really, you know, incredibly lame that you're a dishwasher who wishes that they were, you know, a concert pianist. But maybe that's the part of the story.
I'm in.
Right, exactly. So, like, you know, don't be afraid to look within yourself and say, like, this is what I am. I mean, I myself play music, and I know that I've kind of been on the other end of this thing in the past, and, you know, it never would have occurred to me at a certain time to say, hey, I'm like this really nerdy son of two English professors that thinks that he's a blues musician, you know? And probably if I read that email from somebody, I'd be like, oh, now I'm intrigued. So don't be afraid to, like, get into what your journey has been so far, and lead with that, because you don't forget, the only thing that you can do better than anybody else in the world is just be who you are. Nobody else can do that. They can't take that away from you, and you want to be as much you want to be as yourself as you possibly can. So just try to really run towards that instead of away from it. You know, it's really, and also I think this is something too that maybe would help with that glut of, you know, communications from musicians out there in the larger world. Don't be afraid to plant seeds. You know, it doesn't always have to be like, hey, our event is on Friday, and it's like the one thing that we're ever going to do, because it's our, you know, we've been building this for years, and it's our album release party, and we'd like you to cover it, and please come to it. Instead, you could be like, hey, you know, we're a band that's working in this kind of field, and this is what we've done so far, and we're opening for this artist, and we're recording our debut album right now. And here's, you know, a rough mix of a track, or, you know, maybe you've got an advanced single, or something like that. Just get the attention of that person that you're thinking maybe would enjoy what you're doing, and just, you know, begin to foster a relationship. And then when the album does come out in like 18 months from now or whatever, you know, maybe by that time that person has already kind of got you on the radar. And as Catherine says too, this is really important, like, don't underestimate how incredibly overworked everybody in the music industry is, just like you are. They're running around with their hair on fire at all times. So if you have something that's happening in the semi-near future, that's like another century, you know, for a lot of people. So if you don't get a response based on that, that's okay, you know. they're probably just really concerned with having to do something incredibly urgently that was supposed to be done yesterday. So if it is looming, make sure that you point that out. But I think it's a really good idea also to just like send just a brief message to somebody with just a short example of what you do and a brief description, and just try to get a little dialogue going, because that can be really important. Like I know the guys from the Denim Daddies are here today, and they have you guys have one song out right now, right? One song, and they did something really smart, which is they got a hold of Amy Van Keeken at CKUA and at CJSR, and I don't know how that happened exactly in the first place, but she got hip to your music, and once she enjoyed it, she told her colleagues at those radio stations, hey, you might enjoy this as well. In fact, she selected one of their song for our like weekly playlist of DJ favorites. And so that got the attention of a bunch of other, equally overtasked programmers that maybe would have missed this one song in like, an ocean of new arrivals every week. And sometimes that's all it takes. So now that's a great example of how to like maximize your efforts. Instead of making an album and then sending Catherine an email like 3 days before the album release, send a message to somebody that you think is going to enjoy your music and hope that they will like it. And then, when that album is ready, I know I'm really excited for their release when it happens in the summertime, right? So that maybe wouldn't have been on my radar if it hadn't been for their taking the time to, say, hey, we have this one thing we can put out, and maybe somebody, will put a hook in the line and see if somebody bites and somebody hits. So sometimes that's all it takes. It's just, planting a few seeds earlier rather than later, and just being really patient and methodical about it. And that's really cool. Way to go, you guys. I think that's awesome.
Now let's talk a little bit more about the commercial side. So if we're talking about radio stalking, and what is involved in that? What are people paying for when they hire a radio tracker?
One of the challenges, there's quite a wide gap from the nature of relevance in terms of what I do. So, for example, if I've been hired by a record label with a fairly established group that's very familiar, I'll come back to that term familiar in a second, it's very important, then that's maybe on tour, across Canada, familiarity, there's lots of shows, there's meet and greets. The nature of my goods and services are far more intense. There's a lot more things I'm going to be responsible to do, hooking up interviews, interacting with the radio station for various different things. There could be contesting things. So there's an example where that's a reflection of the nature of the project that I'm working. For what I'll say less familiar projects, that's in my world, that's moving a mountain. It's not fun. It's not fun for any of you. It's just the marketplace. It is what it is. And so there's no magic, right? It's like we're trying to use relationships, and we're trying to reach out and start building a foundation. And quite frankly, I think it has to be built on really clear-cut performance metrics. It's just too tough for what I do. It's like, hey man, this is great. I've sent this to you. That's not enough. There has to be a very pointed and focused reason why I'm asking for your time. So if I've been hired, I have to assess, do I have that? Not to single out, but I'll use my friends and clients, FKB, who are here. When I was introduced to their music, it was through an Edmonton producer named Clayton Bellamy with the Roadhammers, and I become friends with Clayton through his association with another friend and business partner of mine named Dan Davidson. So Clayton is a monster. He's had a huge amount of success in the industry, and so when all those sort of connections came together, and FKB's single Bright Lights came to me, I could have easily said, guys, this is, and I did, the same spiel. It's going to be tough, man. It's really tough. So why would I take that project on? I have to find guideposts that have to give me some kind of reason to say, why am I reaching out and asking? let alone you guys, I have to do that. And so that was an example where the association with a highly recognizable, successful, talented producer is a hook right off the bat. The group had shows planned all across Canada and the US. There's another hook. So now I'm trying to weave this story. And not to overtalk it, man, can I just get someone to even care and listen and respond? It's outrageously tough. And that could take weeks or months, and sometimes people just aren't going to respond. And I know it's not personal as much as I get irritated, angry, and seethe. And I would suggest to you not to take it personally. The fact of the matter is, people do their jobs differently. You have to understand that a lot of the people are doing on-air shows. So imagine that I've got a show to do, right? My job, my paycheck is doing a show, prepping for the show. We're going to be doing the Tim Hortons, radiothon in the community. There we've got meetings, we've got this, we've got this, we've got this, and now you've got this deluge of people, even respected people like myself, asking for their time to listen, to respond, for feedback. Some will and some won't. So to bring it back, there's a wide variation. Emerging artists, unfamiliar artists are very tricky. I'll just say, radio will use this term, unfamiliar to our listeners. That's the challenge. And that's where the risk and the perceived risk is for them. Why are they going? Who are they going to knock out of the incumbents on their playlist where there's unbelievable performance metrics or history, or they've had proven previous hits? Are they going to knock those out to try something, even if it's outstanding, to just be a programming cowboy? It just doesn't happen at terrestrial radio. So again, it's the variation from emerging artists. How do we begin in the totality of what the group is doing to demonstrate that there are performance metrics that they should care about? Is it that we've got 1 million streams, on Spotify for the single? Is it the amount of followers that we've got on our Facebook? Is it that we're playing shows and we just played 2 sold-out shows in your own community? Is it, and those are the kinds of things that cut right to the chase, because if it's anything flowery, again, it just comes back to, yeah, man, sorry, I just don't have time for this. That's the bottom line.
And Bill, terrestrial radio.
That's what I'm talking about.
That means like bricks and mortar, like there's an actual listening to the radio
You
on
can turn on
radio.
your car radio and it's there.
Well, right. So we're talking about
I don't mean just Spotify, because Spotify is huge, but like not streaming services.
That's right. So and I think that's a great thing to think. Terrestrial radio, and I want to be careful here, right? Everything in the music business has taken a bit of a shit kicking, right? What we used to sell has disappeared, right? So now, allegedly, you're going to make your money selling peripheral things, merch and shows. Well, yeah, okay, that sounds great theory for you too, right? It's pretty tough, right? So, the very product has become a loss leader, right? So, the business we're in all these elements, think about the newspaper business, technology, how that's shaping and shifting the nature of the profit for these companies. So we've, speaking of what Catherine was saying, so yeah, we've got online, we've got satellite radio. We can consume music in so many different ways. So when we're coming back to when I say terrestrial radio, we're talking about wattage, an antenna, we're talking about a dial, and those markets are still, even though they're, what can I say, we don't know what the future holds. If you can get radio, man, it can change your life. And so it's still an unbelievable metric to get. Everybody wants it. All the labels you're fighting with still. And if you can get it, it's outstanding. So yeah, that's what we're talking about there. And those stations are serving communities where they have to address their listener demographic, their audiences, and ultimately their advertisers who will decide whether they have jobs at the end of their ratings book.
Question?
Yeah,
Questions,
sorry, you just talked about like the different difficulties it was to get on the different levels of stations that you guys work on. Would you say it's almost a performance metric to say, well, were you on the other ones? Like if you can't convince the local community station to play your song, why even try to bother to ask CBC to play it? Or if CBC, and if neither of those will play it, why would Sonic consider throwing it on? Would you guys agree with that?
Well, sometimes it's the opposite, right? So there's Raghav, who I don't know if you guys know him. He lives in Calgary, but he's a huge hit. And you know Raghav.
Yeah,
Okay? So I got to interview Raghav,
Right.
but he's not almost unknown in Canada. He's an international star. I was thrilled to meet him, and it was really fun to tell that story of this guy who basically grew up in Calgary, got his start in London in the UK, but South Asian Bollywood music and his own pop music, which is South Asian often in language and style, is hugely popular worldwide. And I thought, like, how did we miss this? Like, how do we not know this guy lives here? But then again, that's like CBC being interested in reflecting diversity and all those things that it's our job to reflect, which is the total opposite of what you're talking about.
Raghav's done pretty good.
No, he has done really well, but he's almost unheard of on the mainstream and certainly in the CBC, except for like my show.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. It almost is like it's almost the opposite of what you're wondering about. Like, I think that it's true, and as Bill touched on, it's almost like such a catch-22, right? Like, you have to build X in order to get Y, and in order to get Y, then you have to get X, and it's really hard to get anywhere because it's like success sells, and if you haven't been successful yet, it's pretty hard to get there. But I think legitimately, it's true that you probably like if you are getting played on Sonic, you absolutely will not get played on CJSR, like, period. Like, it's just not ever gonna happen because people are like, well, that's that band that's big on Sonic. Like, they're probably rock stars making $1 billion. Like, I hate that stuff, Like, and vice versa, Like, I think there is a little bit of exclusivity there. There's like different scenes. They don't always talk to one another, unfortunately. But I think the larger issue is, no, it doesn't. I don't think anybody cares at CBC if CJSR plays your music. But I think it is really hard to get that first benchmark of success where you can then say to Bill, hey, we got a zillion Spotify streams, or we got X Facebook followers, or we're opening up for April Wine, or whatever it is. It's like, how do you get to that first thing is really difficult. But I don't think you have to worry about having to like go through a hierarchy of radio successes. It seems like that's in some cases pretty rare. Like, CBC has some overlap with both the campus worlds and the commercial music worlds, but I don't think they're really like interdependent in any particular way.
See, in my world, I'm always, everything's got to be congruent. So I'm always trying to, build the stories, the record, but it's got to be very specific to the nature of who I'm reaching out to, right? So if we've got a secondary market, rock station that has a similar playlist, I'm going to absolutely pass that on. Now, whether anyone cares, that's negligible, but it's relevant. I guess would there be a station grant, for example, that you would take notice? That was great. That was so interesting. I was like, Sonic, right? I would have not known that. I would have thought, hey, man.
It's actually not cool if you get played on CKUA even. It's changing a little bit.
So that's very interesting, right? So I would say, is there a model for radio, or is it irrelevant? Like, would you say, oh, that's cool, like, okay, this is in my wheelhouse. Would there be stations that if I was doing radio promotion and I was trying to say, hey man, here's what's building, this is why I think you should care, would there be something that jumps out at you, or is it, no man, it's just either got to work for us or it doesn't? How would you?
Yeah, I think it either works or it doesn't, but it's a really case by case basis and really scattershot based on the programmer, once again, I think, and especially at the campus stations where a lot of times it's just literally every single show is once a week or once every 2 weeks. So you've got like 100 to 200 different shows, hosted by 200 to 400 different DJs. It's really difficult to get a cohesive. Right. But I think within that, there are some prejudices about, where I think in radio people are just as uptight and prejudiced about music and the delineations between music scenes as anywhere else. But fortunately, I think most radio programmers just want to play what works for their show, you know. And I think if you did bring something to even the snobbiest campus radio DJ, and it really worked for them, they would be into it.
So there we go. So there's a distinction, right? We're talking about tastemakers, right? Which was sort of the legacy of radio, where you would have legendary, radio hosts that had the discretionary abilities to play records that excited them. They had their shows, their personality was the driver of the listenership, and they would introduce, and that was such a magical part of radio. And again, what can we say when we're talking about multi-million-dollar markets in today's marketplace? Those discretionary abilities have been stripped. On-air hosts aren't showing up with their CD collection to say, I don't think I'm going to put in this. I came across this the other day. I think this would be great. It's not going to happen, man. Not going to happen. So what an amazing distinction to understand that, right? So that's what the value is for everyone here, is to say, where do we fit at this point in our career? Where is something where we can, again, do our homework and say, is it worth, if I'm going to reach out to ask for Catherine's time or Grant's time, can I really make a clear cut without fooling around and expressively say, this is why I think you should care. I care about what you do, I listen, and here's 2 sentences to say why we hope you might care about what we do. With the terrestrial stuff, it's just really tough. You're talking about block programming. You've got group PDs that will literally breathe down. The phone will start ringing. Why are you playing that song? Why did you just play that once? Why did you just play that? Well, it's it's a local band and da 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 da. And all of a sudden, it's like, okay, what do we got, a maverick here? Right? This is like the program director, right?
So we like mavericks.
So is that program director local, or is that program director national?
Well, you get
or syndication even.
Like, who's making that?
Well, there's variations on it, and it depends. But often, stations will have some discretionary measures for their local category if they have a local category. So if they say it's an Edmonton group, if I'm reaching out for a group that's from Toronto, they're just going to say, yeah, get back to us when it's in the top 50 or top 40 perhaps. If it's an Edmonton group and we're talking about, Sonic or the Bear, take your pick, then there might be opportunities that are valid where they can say, well, we have a feature for this, we'll be able to put it in, we'll do a pick it or kick it, or we have a show that's dedicated. Now that depends on each station. And then there's very much, a lot of the stations have external consultants. So not only are you responsible for managing your own market, but you have paid consultants that are literally, giving recommendations, quote unquote. That sounds nice, it sounds helpful, and it is, except for it just manifests this environment that is absolutely risk adverse, right? So there's not going to be a lot of fooling around and experimentation when we're talking about the commercial properties.
Can I ask another question maybe then of Catherine? Given the changes in the CBC library, used to be in the old days, you'd send a CD to Gabriel, and he would make sure that everybody across every CBC platform has that in the library. What exactly then is the process?
So it's not Mark anymore, because he's now digitizing. So we do still, as when I say we, I mean like the entire CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. In Toronto, in the National Broadcasting Centre, there is an actual physical music library where we do still have LPs and CDs and other physical forms of cassettes, I suppose. But the idea is that all of the new stuff that is coming in is hopefully all also coming in digital form that then can be uploaded to the VML, which is the Virtual Music Library, which also includes program notes and liner notes and things. It's not just tracks, but that means that So if somebody here were to send me an email that had a link to a SoundCloud and here's our album stream, if I'll listen to it and I'll say, okay, I want to put this on the key of A. So I will send an email to Music Library Toronto. That's, it's not Mark anymore specifically, but there are people, there's several of them, who work as a team to upload the tracks that producers ask for. So they're not actually in a way, I'm the gatekeeper in that category. If a producer from anywhere asks for it, they put it in. They don't say, nah, this stuff sucks. They'll put it in because we asked for it. And then it's available to any CBC station or program or show across the country to use, track by track or a whole album or however they want to use it.
So for CBC, it's still best to email like an individual host that you think would play your song?
That's probably the best if you have a show that you like, so Radioactive or the morning show here or Q&A or something. But if you can also just send a note to, and I'll find the actual address. It's not Music Library Toronto, but it's probably music.library@cbc or something. But you can actually send things directly. But it's probably better to go through somebody that you have a relationship with, or you think that you could have, a chance of getting their attention. Because we do, I guess it's easier now in a way to get stuff into the library now that it's digital, because it's not a physical thing of bringing a thing in and putting a sticker on it and finding a spot on the shelf for it and then cataloging it. I mean, there is still cataloging, but it's it doesn't take very long. And then it's immediately, instantly available. So if I ask for something on Tuesday afternoon, I get it Wednesday morning. Yes?
So you have to ask for it. Like, even if it's in the library, that doesn't mean...
No, if it's in the library already, if someone else has asked for it, it's there. So I can search. If I know that there's this great band that I'm interested in, or somebody has sent me a compelling email, I can just search RBML from my desk without even getting up.
But I mean, it's not going to necessarily get played even if it gets into that.
Correct, yes. It's not going to get played unless somebody wants to play it.
And then,
but it's available to be played.
What makes you want to play a song more than once?
That's a good question. Familiarity is part of it. I mean, there are certain songs that are just catchier and they work better, to open a show. It's got a great atmosphere. Or there's a song that you really want to hear around Christmas, or you want to, it's touching at a certain Mother's Day. I mean, there might be a reason, an emotional reason. It might just be that this is the artist, like Luella Charles isn't here, but her song Crumbling Down, I play it as often as I can because it just sounds great on the show and I love hearing it. I mean, so sometimes it's really a personal taste, trying to put it together a 54-minute show every week that reflects the music that's around you, the new stuff, the interesting stuff. Yeah, I see questions. Brett?
This is sort of a question from a while ago. All respect to CBC and CK Ray, but I want to talk to Bill about something.
Fair enough. He's got the money.
Two quick things. One, you talked about Carly Rae Jepsen before, and you talked about moving people out of the way to get a song that would break on radio. I don't think there's a better example in the last 5 or 6 years than Call Me Maybe, as far as like a huge song that broke.
Yeah.
How did that break, and was it just because it's a fucking catchy song?
Right.
And then the second thing, which is the elephant in the room, is that we talk about Spotify streams, we talk about all this sort of new model of the music industry. We haven't talked about country music radio,
right? Which
still seems to be not only the heaviest hitters in town, but also the ones that seem to be able to break, in my opinion, the worst bands. But they do sell a lot of records. But no, come on, they're across the street. So anyway, can you speak to those two?
Sure. Okay, so my first foray into radio promotion was for a Vancouver-based company called Pitbull Promotions, which is still with friends, colleagues, utmost respect, do the same thing I do. I learn my craft there. And the owner of the company, John Dexter, is a hit songwriter who's written hits with Loverboy and Chicago, and God, I could go on and on and on. Outstanding person. John co-managed Carly Rae Jepsen with Jonathan Simkin at 604 Records. So I was working sort of in this environment where we were sort of working with her managers at the time, the co-management thing. She did, Carly, it's a great example actually, I'm glad you brought it up, because here's the thing, Carly just was an unstoppable force. And I imagine everyone here are unstoppable forces, okay? She was endlessly writing and just wanted to be a great songwriter. And then she had this thing on Canadian Idol, right? That's how I first, heard of her. Had nothing to do with that, me personally anyways. In fact, I think it was after that her producer, Ryan Stewart, who was managed by John Dexter, brought Carly and said, hey John, you should check out this artist, Carly Rae Jepsen. And so it began, putting out records, making records. And she was having, we were having gold records. And when I say we, I'm not the manager, I wasn't the label, I'm just saying I was working within the environment, for her team. So there was no mistakes in that, right? She was, playing shows, writing songs. Her and Ryan were making great songs, and it was being reflected in the marketplace. And we're having gold records for Carly at radio. She one year was up for it's like I think a radio award, CMW type thing or something of that nature. Her and Ryan, and so was Justin Bieber. And Justin went over and introduced himself as one of the other candidates for that. And a year later, Call Me Maybe at that point, Jonathan Simkin had signed her to 604 Records. And that was with Josh Ramsey from Marius Trench, who's a co-writer, and Carly's guitar player, Travis as well. And it was on its way up the charts. And Justin Bieber came home for Christmas and heard it on the radio. And if, as the story goes, you would think that maybe Scooter Braun, plucked this thing out of, thin air. No disrespect to Scooter Braun or, Justin Bieber, but the fact was, look man, that didn't happen by accident. It's like all those elements came from years of dedicated passion and hard work, and chance, rewards the preferred, the preferred, and it was on the radio, and that's how that all came to be, right? So Carly Rae Jepsen is a great example, and if we ever thought that was going to blast off into Bieber world, you could never plan on that, but it happened, and she earned that, through her talent and her dedication to continue on. Regarding the country stuff, sorry, what was the point?
Well, just basically, the country radio is such a big player versus like any other, like rock or alternative or anything, which is competing with satellite, which is competing with Spotify and everything else. How has country radio been able to be so successful? Is it their demographic? Is it because bands are still broken on country radio?
Okay, so I'll be quick because I don't want to blather on. We can talk about some of this stuff later. I was never a country guy. I was a heavy metal guy, Black Sabbath, Metallica, and then John Coltrane after I learned about music. That was weird. But hey, so country was not my vibe. In terms of what I do now, I love country to death. Specifically in terms of the business of what I do. Country radio, there are still secondary markets with independent radio stations that do have the discretionary measures where they really care about the music. They care about artists, and they're willing to invest their time to meet artists. And you can get them out there, and they will play songs. Now, their spins won't count towards the charts, perhaps, but there's a clear-cut, performance metric where you can say, we're moving the needle there. People care. And they're not pushovers. They're not going to play lousy music. But the field is different. The mosaic is different. The landscape is different for country radio. And I just think it's because it's partially the nature of the music, the stations, smaller things, whereas with pop and rock, pop is about testing and research. And where you have small market secondary top 40 stations where you think that might happen as well, it's actually the opposite. They'll say, dude, we don't have the resources to test and research, so we look at, you know, Virgin Calgary, we look at Winnipeg, we look at Toronto, and we look at the charts. Where, you know, we just don't have the resources to do that. So there just isn't the same, the nature of it, I guess. We play the hits, we don't make the hits, pop music, you know. It's part of the nature, I guess, unfortunately, of the way it is. And country music, it still maintains a more organic and honest passion, a real passion, where programmers, they may not be able to help you, they may not be able to add it, but they care. And most of them do, not all, but most of them really do. And if you send them something good, they're going to be interested and they'll express that. And that's a huge divide from some of the other things I experience.
All right, so we've got 5 minutes left. Who's got a burning question? Anyone?
I was going to ask about charting. What does it take to chart on the CKUA versus the CBC? What do those numbers look like? How does that happen?
It's kind of a dirty little secret how few spins are required for an album to chart at CKUA. It's almost like the top 30 chart is a 30-way tie for first. Not quite, but because it's so eclectic and because every programmer is making their own decisions, it's like it's not at all a strategically arrived at chart. It's a genuine reflection of how many spins there were for an album in a given week. And you know, that's why, as much as it may or may not be something that completely makes or breaks your career, you can have your album chart on CKUA with a surprisingly modest amount of on-air time. And so that's why making sure that if your show is right for Andy Donnelly's Celtic Show and Tom Cochran's Folk Roots, you get in touch with those guys. You know, because, man, those guys each play your album once that week. You're halfway to like number 5, you know? So it really makes a big difference. It's a real, like, you know, the rubber really is meeting the road like day to day in that sense on CKUA. Oh, and there was a question up front. I meant to ask you. You had a question a while ago.
Yeah, no, actually, it's kind of evolving as it's going, but to jump on that bandwagon of charting, if you're charting on college and community radio station and you're getting on earshot, is that kind of the metrics that commercial radio would be looking at?
Probably not.
I think that's probably a kind answer, right? The answer is absolutely, certainly not.
I was trying to buy enough time in my brain to process something that would come out more positively, and it didn't take a long time to realize that it wasn't really an amazing.
And that's because of the numerical thing that Grant just talked about mostly?
I just think it's just a different game, you know, they just don't care. There's not time for caring. It's like, show us the marketplace and, you know, it's indifference. We don't care. And what are the metrics that are going to grab your attention? So if you said, hey, it's true. If you could say, I've got a sold out show at the Commodore Ballroom in Vancouver, and our last single independently just got 900,000, you know, plays, and you could send some stuff. All right, I might just check that out.
Yeah, then the earshot thing is sweeter, right? But otherwise, it's just like, hey, a collection of individuals based on their own predilections, you know, pointed toward this.
Well, I mean,
right?
The easy answer is you just said that anything played on Sonic would never, ever make it to you, so Sonic might feel similarly.
Yeah.
What's the lineage of us saying, wow, this is something that we need to care about? And it's nothing personal. It's not better than. It just is what we're trying to...
They're serving different markets.
That's right.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And unfortunately, there isn't as much crossover as you might wish. I think back in the day, maybe there was a little bit more. There wasn't quite so much compartmentalization, you know, like back in sort of the golden days of FM, I think. But basically, you know, radio kind of figured out that some things are surefire and some things just aren't. And, you know, you can't gamble big bucks at the big poker table on things that aren't surefire, basically what it comes down to.
You had a question?
Yeah, just wondering if you're working with a radio promoter and you're trying to get your music out there and play on radio, but is it okay to still follow up as an artist with an email to those same stations, or is that too much? Or
I don't know. That's I would say, why would you have somebody repping your music to like There's times where I would suggest very clear-cut strategic reasons to do that. So, for example, I've got a band I'm working with called Dead Set Society. They used to be members in a group called My Darkest Days that I did. They had a huge #1 mainstream US hit, blah, blah, blah. And so I've been setting up some interviews and some radio spots that we're taking out, et cetera, et cetera. And they got a factor grant for radio spots to take out. So I've opened a door where now I'm encouraging the band leader to step in, not because I want to defer the responsibility of that, because I have that relationship. Now I want to use that next step of him to, further. So it's all very dependent, right? So if it makes sense and it's an undertow of why does this make sense? Otherwise, someone say, wait a minute, is that the same band that Bill's reaching out about? And like, how is that congruent? And why would we be doing that? And that could be really weird pretty quick.
Yeah, it's still a coordinated strategy when you're doing that, right?
It has to be.
Because you're right. If you get weird, different messages from other people, it does seem strange, and you don't know what's going on exactly, and you wonder, it just seemed kind of bizarre, and it does kind of start to muddy the waters a bit, for sure.
Is Bill doing his job? You can send that email, but we've gone south pretty damn quick.
No, I just saw because you guys were talking about, you want to make a statement when you send an email,
right?
And the first line. So if you get it actually from the artist, then does that make a difference? Is that
if you're not
maybe the station wants to hear from the artist, they don't want to hear from
no, that's a valid point. I don't believe that commercial radio is for everyone, but that doesn't mean you can't try something. So my tip would be, if you could reach out and say, Edmonton artist, help possible, something that might, that would probably grab someone. If you see something in the subject line that's just, a question that kind of piques the interest, it indicates that it's a local thing, local artist, help possible, question mark. That's about as good as you're going to get for someone, okay, what's this about? And then if you I listen to your station, I love your show, blah, 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 I think we're fit. Is there any way can I attach the MP, or can I send you an MP3? And maybe you can foster a relationship. And if you do, some people will care and respond, others won't. They just won't get back to you. If they do, and you've already done as much as I would be able to do for you, and in fact, you've had better results because they care about you, and it's not a middleman. Sometimes the radio stations don't want to do that because they don't want to have to get into things and make it too personalized, and they don't want to have to let people down, and that's where they do kind of like middlemen. But in that instance, if it's a local scenario, I'd say that's a great way to build a relationship. I think it's, if you do it smart and you're not idiotic. There's so many jokers, man.
So don't be idiotic.
That's the advice. Just don't be a joker, man, please.
That's a great. Don't be idiotic, and you'll eventually, potentially get on the radio.
You'll have a better shot, right? Because you get people sending things, and I hate to be a jerk. That is delusional. Oh, I wrote this song, or maybe it's a country thing, and it's like, I'm not done, crapping on the person, right? But it's like, come on, man. Like you're asking someone to like, I like writing songs, and and all that, and it's just like, okay.
Just because you've written 200 songs doesn't mean they're 200 good songs.
There you go. Right. Yeah. You got it.
All right. So let's wrap things up. I want to thank everyone for coming. Alberta Music does sell warm toques. If you would like to buy one of them, yeah, because it's so toasty warm in here, you might not need it. But if you're not super toasty warm, they're $10 for coming here today. They're $15 if you come to our office. So super big deal. You can go talk to Olivia if you're interested in toques. Also, my name is Allison. I'm the program manager with Alberta Music. I always forget to introduce myself. If you have any feedback about tonight's event, please email me. My email address, a lot of you guys have pens you might have put away already, Allison, Allison, @albertamusic.org. So send me your feedback. We use that type of thing for our funding requests. So if we have people that have attended our sessions that provide us with valuable feedback, that looks really good and helps us get more funding to put on events like this. We also want to hear requests about other people that you'd like us to bring in, topics that you want us to explore, anything. I want all that information. Send that email to me. We can also help you follow up. So if you want help crafting some of these ideas that we've talked about tonight, you can get in touch with us. That's what we're here for. Yeah, that's about it. So thanks everyone for coming. Please mingle and meet each other.
Well, can you press that each other?